What I would like everybody to sort of think about, and you don't have to raise your hand or answer this one, is this word up on the screen here, athlete. How many people, and again, just sort of think to yourself, how many people identify with this word? Do you think of yourself as an athlete? Some people are nodding yes, even though I said don't. A lot of people will think, hey, you know, an athlete is someone who's professional, right? Someone who's out there winning awards and medals and racing and competing. And other people don't look at it that way. And to sort of explain how I've come around to the definition of what athlete means, I want to take you way, way, way back to my childhood, early 70s. None of you remember this show because I think I'm the oldest person in the room, but I will walk you through what this meant to me as a kid. So this is my second favorite TV show. My first favorite TV show was Saturday morning cartoons, of course. That's always fun. The thing I loved about ABC's Wide World of Sports was that it didn't focus on one particular sport. And when I grew up in my household, we weren't a basketball family, we weren't a football family. We sort of watched all the sports, boxing and gymnastics and track and field. It was always on TV. That was the sort of multi-sport mixed background that I came from. And Wide World of Sports had that in a nutshell. It was everything. Everything that you possibly wanted to watch on TV, they talked about. Gymnastics, track and field, swimming, weightlifting, the whole thing. It was like Olympics every Saturday morning, and I loved it. And I was super, super excited about that. And what it opened my eyes up to is that athletes can do a lot of different things, a lot of different sports, right? I wasn't so fixated on one particular type of athlete. But actually my favorite part of this whole show, and you're gonna, well, I'll laugh at it, but the best part about it was the opening monologue, where the announcer would say this idea of like, he would say, it's the thrill of victory, right? And he would see all these powerful athletes doing this crazy stuff on TV. And then he would cut to the agony of defeat. Now, it's kind of a crappy screen grab, but this is a Slovenian skier. I was going off a ski jump one morning, a little too much snow on the ramp, and he tried to make some adjustments, and he didn't do it well, and he just rocketed off the end of the ramp, and it was horrible. The guy was spinning. You could see how close he got to some people there. It was amazing, and I kept watching it over and over again as a kid. I would sort of go back and forth about this line, the thrill of victory and agony of defeat, as I sort of got older and I started thinking about what sport meant to me personally. And I recognized there's truth in this phrase that is maybe different than perhaps what the TV show meant. For me, thrill of victory and agony of defeat was a way of exposing what athletes really go through on a day-to-day basis. There are highs and elations and wins and successes, and there are lows, right? There's failure, there's losing races, there's injury. All of these things are what athletes go through, and to be honest with you, all of these things are what we go through when we exercise or when we have fun or when we go out and play or ride our bikes or go for a run or when we race or when we compete. So the word athlete to me means a lot of different things, but for me it means something that is, I think, universal to all of us in this room, which is there's opportunities for us to succeed and do really well, and there's opportunities for us to fail and learn from that failure. And I think that helped for me knock down the idea of what athlete meant. It wasn't the professional athlete anymore on the pedestal. It was something that maybe I could achieve as well. So I've found ways to identify with this word. So for you, as you're riding your bikes with your friends, whether it's for fun on the weekends or whether you're in a race and you're competing, or whether you're running your first running race, which I recently did, maybe you're older, maybe you're younger, or maybe you're out with your friends on the weekend and you're doing a fun race and you're gonna end up having coffee. I think the price for admission to becoming an athlete really is if you sweat. If you sweat, you're an athlete. And I think that puts a nice bar where we can all achieve that and be very happy with our success and continue to move on if we really want to take it even more seriously than that. Fortunately, if you sweat and you're an athlete, there's a product for you. Strava is a company that was founded a few years ago, but it was based on this premise that athletes want to connect with one another. We want to celebrate our training and discover our next adventure and really connect with like-minded individuals. Fortunately, there are a lot of people out there like that. There's, we have, Strava is found in over 195 different countries. We have plenty of athletes all around the world. And we're averaging, about 15 million shared activities per week. So it's robust, and there's clearly a community out there of people who like to be athletic and like to engage in their sport. Now, as designers, there's a lot of challenges to design for this type of people, this group of people. If you think about it, all these different aspects go into recording your activity or sharing your activity. We've got things like discovering your routes and tracking your progress, finding your people that you want to engage with and do activities together, either training for a race or just for fun. The one topic, though, that I wanted to sort of focus on tonight is this idea of social. Now, let me take you back to my childhood, and I'll talk to you about what social meant to me as a young athlete. For anyone who has had kids or who has played soccer, you'll immediately recognize orange slices, right? This is what you had in halftime at a soccer game. And it was the best part of the soccer game, to be honest with you. My dad was my coach. So picture me, 8, 9 years old. I'm about this tall still. And he's a full-on coach. He's organizing the plays and the routines, and he's getting all the schedules together. My dad's a really good coach. Me, all I cared about was hanging out with my friends and playing soccer. I cared about the social aspects of the game. I wanted to go to the birthday parties. I wanted to hang out with my friends. I wanted to sit on the sidelines. I wanted the oranges. And if you've ever seen a soccer game at that age, it's really just a bunch of kids going around the ball, right? They're just sort of chasing the ball. So my dad's over there furiously pointing at a clipboard, and I'm just having a lot of fun. But I recognize, even at an early age, that the best part, or at least a very integral part of sport, is the social ecosystem that surrounds it. It's not always about the activity, or I should say at least the activity is a part just like the social dynamic is. That translates well into today. Even if you're a sort of a single player type of an athlete, right? Maybe you're just a long distance runner, ultra marathoner, maybe you're a single cyclist, or maybe you do a sport where it's really just about you and your performance. Even then, you still have an ecosystem, a network of people around you that are supporting you and driving you and inspiring you, and even motivating you to be your best. So even in this picture, this person's a runner, right? But look at all the other people who are urging her to do her best and right there for her. Those could be family members, there could be coaches, those could be other competitors or other athletes. So I've come to this belief that all sport is social. You cannot divorce the two, you can't pull the two apart. I believe strongly that social is a component of sport. So if social is such a big deal, what about all these other networks? How do these play into the way athletes behave and the way athletes sort of live their lives being active? I'd argue there's nothing wrong with any of these. And I would actually argue that most of these are aimed at sort of a scale, right? They want you to have as many followers as possible. They want you to follow as many people as possible because that just increases the value of the network over time. A couple of these, maybe say Twitter and Instagram, are maybe more of the sort of one-to-many. It's about broadcasting. It's your accomplishments or your thing to the world. Maybe Facebook and LinkedIn are a little bit more about the network and the sort of different groups of people. But I'm making generalizations. The point is, these networks, among others, exist today, and they serve a wide variety of audiences and a wide variety of needs. Facebook, for example, you could have your work friends on there, you could have people from high school, you could have your mom's club, you could have your sporting activities, and you could have your buddies that go play pool on the weekends. I don't know. The point is that Facebook sort of serves everyone, and it works really well. But when you need something a little bit more specific, I think there's some different opportunities out there. So what works great about social networks, of course, we all know this. We reach a large audience. There's many, many different ideas, sometimes too many ideas out there in the world. It's super easy to communicate with people, whether it's direct messaging or email or in-mail or whatever you want to call it. You can meet new people and you can maintain those relationships that maybe you've had in the past. Of course, we all know about some of the, maybe the negative aspects of social networks, right? Fake news. There was some interesting news this morning. We won't talk about the mushrooms or anything like that, but there was also this FOMO that people are worried about, right? There's bullying, all these things that sort of plague us with these large, ever-present social networks. So my question is, do all social networks and all communities have to be this way? And I would argue very strongly that no, and there's a couple of examples. If anyone's used VSCO before, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So VSCO is a photo editing app that you can download and use, and it has a small community that's built up around it. It was originally designed for professional photographers. In fact, the photo editing tools in VSCO are outstanding. It's really, really great tool. And they attracted a bunch of photographers, and the photographers were able to sort of tell their story and share their photos with the world. But because they were so focused on creating great photo editing and sharing tools, they actually chose to leave a couple things out. They left out things like comments and likes, the things that typically you would find in a social network. Consequently, their audience changed. Now they have in fact, I believe they have more teenage girls on VSCO than they do professional photographers. And the reason why is because it is a safe place for young kids, young adults, to share what they're taking photos of, because there are no comments and there's no peer pressure and there's no judgment. So, for example, my kids use Instagram and they curate. They maybe share like 12 photos, if that, because it's a constantly curated version of their life, because people can provide comments back on it and they can like it and they can sort of judge the effectiveness of those photos. Whereas with VSCO, they take whatever photos they want, style it however they want, and share as creatively as they want. So there's an example of a small community that is, with the right focus tools, can be super successful and doesn't have to reach scale. So then the follow-on question, of course, is, well, does the world need a social network for athletes? So I want to share 3 things that I believe to be true about this. First, athletes are invested. We know this because we've done some studies, we've done some research, we know our athletes really well, the people who are on Strava. By this, I mean people they actively put their time, their energy, their money into being a better athlete. They are investing as much of themselves into this life as they possibly can, because that investment says something about them. The effort that they put in is a direct reflection of who they are as a person and as an athlete, and that means something to them, and they are very willing to spend that time and money. The second one is the athlete experience it's an authentic one, right? Fear and doubt, as well as elation and pride, your self-worth, they're all very real feelings. And as an athlete, those are brought to the surface because you're talking about your performance and you're talking about the way you're judging yourself if you're doing a good job or not. Those are real things, especially when you factor in injury or anything else that affects you very physically or emotionally. So your struggle with these things is what sort of reflects the effort that you're putting in. Right? This is a super important thing to think about as you're building a network for athletes. And the third thing is that this kind of social isn't for everyone. There's a very real chance that if you take a picture of yourself sweating as you run through the park on the weekend, or you're covered in grime, or you're covered in dirt, or you're sunburnt, those aren't necessarily photos that you're going to post on Instagram or even Facebook. Because one, you look like crap, even though you're having a lot of fun. But you may not want your larger audience to see what you look like when you're exercising or when you're engaged in an activity at that level. Your friends who are doing that with you love it. And they love to see you sweat and be all skinned up if you fell, or crossing that finish line and you're about to pass out. That's good stuff, because those are the type of people that engage in this activity with you. So I believe, Strava believes, that there is value in these smaller network groups. These groups are designed for specific use cases and maybe not the general audience that you're used to with something like Facebook or Twitter. I would also argue that these smaller networks work in concert with these larger networks. So I'm not up here saying that Facebook is bad and you must use something like Strava. Not at all. There's a time and place for any of that type of social engagement, because different motivation, different encouragement, and different sort of social feedback comes from all different channels. What I am arguing for is that there is an opportunity for people to build, for companies like us to build networks that reflect the type of activity that someone is going through. So for example, here's how maybe an athlete's social network sort of starts to build out. And you'll notice there's different circles, different groups of people, and they interact with people differently. They interact with athletes differently. So for example, first one is your family. Your family is the people that are actually giving you permission to do this, right? They're cool with you going out at 5 in the morning on a run or spending all day in the mountains, on a mountain bike race. Family is an enabler and a motivator and a supporter of your activity. And that is sort of your first circle here for a lot of athletes. Maybe your friends are also super important here. These are the people that you actually maybe do the activities with, or that inspire you in a different way. Maybe it could be your local running group, or maybe your non-local friends who are also interested and share a passion around this. Maybe it's people who think you're crazy, but they love your Instagram posts, and that's that maybe might be your next layer of people. And it sort of continues on from there, right? You get acquaintances, you get a larger community, you even go all the way out to maybe your heroes or your pros or even your bike mechanic, right? But the point is that you have different interactions with these groups, and there's different tools for that type of facilitation. We might build a tool that helps you discover people in your neighborhood that want to run at your pace because they're training for the same race that you are. We might also help you discover, hey, I've just flew into New York, where's the best place to run in Central Park? Cool, here's a few routes that you might want to discover to go run at a safe time in this city that you don't know anything about. So there's different tools for discovery and connectivity that need to be built to solve for these very local, specific type of social networks. Again, I would just echo that different groups also give you different types of feedback and different types of stimulation. So those communication tools go both ways. I talked a little earlier about how maybe sort of Twitter or other groups are one-to-many. I think in these smaller, more close-knit groups, it is a much more reciprocal conversation, and you need to build tools that inspire both parties or all the parties to sort of connect in different ways. Now, the benefit of all this is kind of obvious, at least how we've seen it recently. This kind of community nets some pretty good results. We've discovered that 69% people feel happier when they're part of an athletic community, Strava or otherwise. That type of interaction, that type of community and camaraderie brings real tangible results to people, and it's noticeable, and I love it. 83% of the people are sort of motivated by this sort of community of exercise. In fact, there was an article I read today, I think it was on, I forget what website it was, but it talked about how if you bring a partner to work out, if you go to the gym, whether it's Barry's or just any regular gym, that partner actually motivates you to work harder, maybe do more reps, and actually reduces your fatigue. You tend not to feel so tired when you have a partner. It's all psychological, but the point is that community, that connection, that camaraderie really drives and motivates people to become the best version of themselves. And we notice this very tangibly because we see additional activity increase. 37% of additional activities are from when people train with other people, and that's noticeable, and that just continues to fuel and drive that community. So again, if I'm a designer and my design team is focused on all these types of things here, helping people train, finding the right gear, exposing them to new routes, finding your people, there's a lot of challenges that go into that. How far up are we that we can hear the sirens that loud? I would offer that there's a lot of challenges that designers face. One, we're fortunate at Strava to have a ton of data. We have all sorts of smart devices and smart machines and gyms and partners that send us a ton of data. Our problem is sorting that and finding the most relevant and valuable content and sharing that back to drive and motivate people. I'd also argue that we have such a connected group of people that it can be challenging to find the right ways and the best and most exciting ways to connect them and help them discover what matters to them as well. But again, all of this, whether it's social or tracking or data analytics, all of this stuff is really designed to help people become, hopefully, a better version of you as an athlete or as a person. That's what I got. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know I'm between you and pizza, so I don't want to keep you up here too much. You're welcome to find me on Twitter. please email me if you have any questions. You can find me on Strava as well. I'm excited to chat about this.
Andrew, thank you. We have about, let's call it 5 to 7 minutes for Q&A. So as always, raise your hand. Right here, yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. I'm really interested in how, so you were describing how certain social media, you're able to curate, you're able to show certain sides of yourself that are better than others. And I kind of see that with Strava too, especially when people try to be what we call like Strava slaves, Strava heroes, and they try to run faster to impress people or farther so you get more kudos. And I'm wondering if you've done any studies on like how that has impacted the network of athletes in terms of like their performance, their increase in injury or whatever it is, and like how those, and how you balance out sort of like the detriments of being a Strava user versus like the value that users gain from it?
That's a great question, and I will absolutely, if you get more kudos on an activity, which is our version of sort of the thumbs up, that drives you as an athlete to perform even more or to be more active, for sure, no doubt. Interestingly enough, though, your community on Strava is a lot smaller than maybe your community on Facebook or anywhere else. So chances are the people that are giving you those kudos or leaving comments are people that you know. We actually had, there's a couple of interesting comments where when we were playing with our algorithmic feed and trying to show the right, whatever everybody tries to do, they show the right content at the right time. When we sort of tweaked the display of activities, it affected the way that people gave kudos. So for example, if you went on a run in the morning and it was raining, but your activity didn't show up to someone until later that day and it was sunny out, you actually got less kudos because people were like, it was sunny. It was an easy run. But if you were raining, people were like, hell yeah, that was awesome. And they give you more kudos, right? So I think whether or not people show off or certainly people try to get the best time on segments. You know, we have Kings of the Mountain and Queens of the Mountain. So we definitely encourage that competition on the network. But I think people are just naturally driven to sort of celebrate wins. And, you know, people like to receive it, I think, as well. It drives them. What's that? Can I tell you why you can't unkudos? Yeah. Because we locked that shit down. No, actually, I don't have a good answer for you. I promise you I'll go find that out. But once you give a kudos, you can't take that back.
Hey, just curious. Is your feed updated in chronological order?
It is based on an algorithm, and I cannot quite recite the sort of the science formula that goes into it, but it is a mix of chronological and hopefully what we think is the right and most relevant stuff for you. We are definitely still tweaking that, as everybody is. Certainly, if you've seen the news lately about Twitter, they're really trying to dial that in right now as well. So,
I have to ask now, if you could change one thing about Twitter, what would it be?
So for those of you who don't know, Twitter is very near and dear to my heart. I've been, I remember when it was an alpha. I remember when they were literally drawing in the sketches out. So I am a Twitter both fanboy and apologist. I would love for there to be some way to edit. And I know everybody wants this, and I think there's really interesting ways to do it without destroying the platform. But I can't tell you how many times I've done a typo, and I would love to have fixed that as well. But
right. An edit tweet button, got it. One other question, switching gears a little bit. You've been a VP of design in a number of organizations, and I'm sure you've cultivated the next generation of design leadership. What's the one thing that you find yourself working with time and again on with first-time design managers? Like, what's the feedback you give them? What's the skill you see new managers need to develop most often?
That is a good one. I think, well, so often design managers graduate from being sort of senior designers, right? They move up in their career. And I think one thing I would say is that I think the worst thing you can do is if you're interested in becoming a design manager, the worst thing you can do is view it as the only way that you will progress in your career, because that is absolutely not true. A lot of people will say, well, you know, I'm an IC, I'm a senior designer, but if I'm going to keep going up that ladder, I got to become a manager because that's the only way to do it. That is complete crap. you absolutely need to find an organization or structure an organization so that you can continue as an individual contributor, as a designer, and not have to manage if you don't want to. That said, you want to manage, awesome. But now I think what you have to realize as a design manager is you've got some additional keys and sort of tools in your hand. You are now no longer just affecting the design. It doesn't give you more power over the design, not at all. In fact, if anything, it's design, that role and that position is for you to then work with and pull out the best design you can out of your peers. And that is a hard transition to make, going from a peer relationship to now a managerial relationship. And I think that is just a really tough challenge. So I often just try to sort of clue people into that you're no longer just a senior designer with more power and a longer title. You actually have a different role in the organization. You need to step into that maybe in ways that you kind of didn't anticipate in the beginning.
So I think you've very accurately described that you have a core strong group of users within the Strava network. How are you looking to grow your user base and add new members to that number?
That is a great question, and since our PR person is here in the back room, I'm going to try to keep this one as clean as possible. I guess I would say, hey, look, Strava has grown a network around particularly runners and riders who have been competitive, and we absolutely love that community, and that community has helped us really gain a foothold within the athletic community. Reality is, they do more than just running and riding. I'm willing to bet that if you're a competitive runner, you probably also do other kinds of sports. Maybe you do yoga. Maybe you ride your bike with friends on the weekends. Maybe you do other types of CrossFit. Some of that is in service of making you a better athlete, and some of that is just because it's fun and it's different. So I think what we have to recognize as we grow our sort of the kinds of sports that we celebrate on Strava and the kinds of athletes that we invite into our community, I think we have to recognize that there are other types of activities that people do, and we have to make them feel as first-class citizens on the platform, as well as provide value, as much value as they're getting out of being a competitive cyclist, to these other kinds of sports, which will then continue to grow the network. I will offer one more thing, which is to say that it is a shame if you look at the world in black and white in terms of competitive and non-competitive. There's such a spectrum there. Again, you might be a competitive runner, but a very sort of experiential or fun-seeking cyclist, right? So there's no such thing as an athlete being just competitive. There's a spectrum in each athlete, and that means there's a spectrum in all of us. And that's, I think, a big design challenge is for us to design a tool or a series of tools that really hits the needs for all different athlete types.
Andrew, that is an amazingly inspiring note to end on. Thank you so much. That was cool.
Welcome. Thank you.
Well done.